What's up?
Hello, welcome to Ladies First Fridays. The last time you saw Zena, Kata, and myself, we were in Vegas, but we are not in Vegas anymore. However, the sports news cycle continues. So thank you for joining today, Zena. Let's get into it because we have company waiting. But let's start with the topic you and I don't normally start with, and that is the NFL. Some backs have been unhappy lately. Saquon Barkley being one of them. The deadline for any extensions was Monday. He was not extended. Josh Jacobs wasn't. A number of people were not extended. And so he went on a podcast and he spoke about the contract situation. Let's hear what Saquon had to say.
You know your words, but at the same time, you got to be mature about it. You got to understand it's business. You can't take it personal. $10 million is a lot of money. But when you talk about, I know what Derrick Henry signed for. I know what Nick Chubb signed for. I know what Dalvin Cook contract previously was. I know what Christian McCaffrey contract is. He's the highest. He's at like $16 million. And I'm not even asking. Of course. I'm not even asking to be the highest paid. In my belief, I believe I'm the best running back in the NFL. You ask me that to my core. I believe I don't care about stats. I don't care about this. Like, every situation was different. I believe I'm the best running back in the NFL. And I'm not even asking to be paid the highest running back. I'm sitting here telling you at one point in the season I have 40% of our offense, and I finished the season with 30% of our offensive production. Like, I don't know what other bats can really say that, and were able to help my team make it to the playoffs. The first time I make it to the playoffs in 5, 6, 7 years. So I'm not even going to war for that. I have no worry about going on a football field and knowing that I'm not playing for my worth, or saying if I have to play under, because this is my leverage. My leverage is I can say to the Giants, I can say to my teammates and be like, you want me to show you my worth? You want to show you how valuable I am to the team? I won't show up. I won't play it down. And that's a play I can use. Anybody knows me, knows that's not something I want to do. But like, it's something that crossed my mind. It's like I never thought I would ever do that. But like, now I'm at a point where it's like, Jesus, like I might have to take it to this level. And like, am I willing? Am I prepared to take it to the level? I don't know. That's something I got to sit down and like I got to talk to my family. I got to sit down and talk to my team. Got to really, strategize about this. Can't just like go off of emotions. Cause like I sit here and say like, oh, be mature. I have my moments. Like, I have my moments where I want to, like, I see something on this stupid ass phone and I want to respond. I want to let the world know how I really feel. But like, I am at a place where if I do go on the field and I have to play and prove again, I'm fine with that.
Jim Trotter, welcome to Ladies
What's
First
up,
Fridays.
ladies?
We love it when you're with us.
Welcome.
You guys know I love being with you guys, so happy to be here.
Thank you. So that was Saquon Barkley. And, I think he said so much. I really wish I could have played more of what he was saying. And I don't mean to sound like one of those people who's like, I want to be very careful how I say this, but I was just very impressed with his knowledge of like his contract situation, negotiating, his value, his worth, how he discussed it. And I wish that all players were like basically as knowledgeable as him. He talked about his value in relation to the cap. Like, why would we be thinking about what something was, so many years ago because the cap has gone up? He just talked about a lot in there that we couldn't even include. But I thought it was a great discussion. And there's been this quote, Jim, that's been going around because, it was like, oh, he may sit out. And it was something he discussed, but the way the quote was sort of presented, it was almost like it didn't tell the full story. So that's why I thought it was important for us to include everything he said there, because he really wasn't threatening to sit out. He's just like, that would be his leverage play, but he's not really sure that he wants to do that. So I just thought it was fascinating, a number of the things he said. And I wanted to understand from you, Jim, what are your thoughts? Do you think there's a chance he would sit out? And how do you see this situation playing out?
No, I don't think he sits out at all. I think you could tell even during that interview that that's not the direction he was leaning. Now, that could always change, but I don't see that happening. Here's the other thing. Even if the Giants at this point wanted to get a long-term deal done with Saquon, they can't. They're prohibited under the collective bargaining agreement from negotiating a long-term deal with him until after this season now, because the deadline is passed. So we are where we are as it relates to that situation. Everything he said is true about understanding his value to the team, but the reality is that doesn't matter at this point. It is a business. The Giants have made a decision not to pay him on a long-term deal at this point, just as the Raiders have made that decision on Josh Jacobs. Both of them are the heart and soul of their offenses. But for this year, they're going to have to play under the franchise tag, or if they choose not to come in, they're going to lose money that they're never going to regain.
Do you think, Jim, that, when people say that they put on the franchise tag, that essentially is one big FU to a player, right? It's basically telling them, we don't have to pay you, or we don't have to offer you something big in that case. When you think about, even if he has to get a contract extension after this season, the relationship seems broken now, right? In that same podcast, and Saquon talked about he appreciated John Mara talking to him like a man, and coming to him, and he respected the fact that he was talking to him about business and wanting to extend that, and that was a fruitful conversation. And then in February,
oh, Zena, I think you froze for a moment.
A franchise.
Yeah, look, I think I understand where you were going with this. The relationship may seem fractured, but I would argue that it's
blistered things a bit. Oh,
yeah, I would argue that it's not fractured. I've seen too many instances where players or teams have let their feelings get in the way for a moment, and then in the end, there's this kumbaya moment, and they all come together. I think if Saquon ultimately gets what he wants after this season, if the Giants step up and pay him, everything will be fine and this will be forgotten. But right now it's raw. And as he said, he's human. He has those moments where his real feelings start to come out, but he's mature enough to stop himself from addressing that on social media, and I applaud him for that. But no, this is just the nature of negotiations, unfortunately, in business. And let me say this. The problem I have with all of this was what happened in 2011 during the collective bargaining agreement, when the union basically threw running backs under the bus. Because what happened was the owners wanted a rookie wage scale. And Gene Upshaw, the previous executive director of the NFLPA, would never give it to the owners, because he said a rookie is only a rookie for 1 year, and after that he is a team leader and a team captain. Well, DeMaurice Smith gave that up in his first term, his first negotiation as NFLPA executive director. And my thing was, if you were going to give them a rookie wage scale on the front end, controlling their costs, then these players have to be able to make that money up on the back end. And when you give owners a 4-year guarantee, plus a 5th-year option, plus 3 years to franchise a player, if you're a running back and the average career span, according to the NFLPA, is just over 3 years, you are never going to see the open market if you are a talented player. And that is simply unfair to these players. But the players agreed to it. So in essence, they have no one to blame but themselves.
Yeah. The players and their collective bargaining is always something I think to look at and question. I just wonder, Jim, how did we get to the point where the running back position has become so devalued? And what, I don't think he should sit out. I don't see any purpose in that. But what purpose would it serve for him to sit out? Is he, the Giants have to know his value. He said it on there, I account for 40% of the offense, something around that number. But I get it that all running backs aren't created equal, but he is one of the best. According to him, he's the best in the National Football League. So when we know that a running back of his caliber is worth more, why do we have to keep going through this?
Because the system is set up in such a way that teams can take this position. It's always fascinating to me how teams say, well, we can't pay a guy because traditionally and precedent says you don't pay a player at this position this amount of money. But if you flip it, and a player outperforms a situation, or you see a Deshaun Watson get a fully guaranteed contract, and then Lamar Jackson may say, I want that. And the team says, well, no, we can't do it because it's never been done. But here it's just been done for Deshaun. So that doesn't fit. So the teams try and play it both ways here. The thing that's unfortunate for me is, again, running backs, if they are talented, and as you say, there are different levels to running backs. They are not all created equally. And their value goes beyond just their ability to run the football or score touchdowns or even catch passes. One of the most important things for a running back in today's game is pass protection. Because if you can't protect that quarterback, who is the most important player on that field, the chances of you succeeding are not very good. Saquon Barkley, Josh Jacobs, these guys are complete running backs, and so therefore they should be paid. But the system is such that teams don't have to, and they choose not to in this instance. And we've now gotten to a point where if Josh Jacobs or if Saquon were to decide not to sign their tenders and to sit out this year, could they make a point? Yes. But is it going to change anything? I just don't see it.
Yeah. So, Jim, I wonder, I sort of said, like, it seems personal for Saquon Barkley, and it should be. And I say that because, like, he removed the Giants. He removed the Giants from his bio. And I know you mentioned that, like,
Deebo Samuel did the same thing, didn't he? With the 49ers, I think.
I feel like that's the new move. That's the new move for all athletes, to indicate that they're over the situation, or to posture like, this is me establishing my power and my strength and removing you. Yeah, it's definitely a thing.
And look, he indicated that he wants to stay with the Giants, like his family's from there. He's like in that area. So you're right. It probably will eventually just all work out. But, I just kind of always, he kept trying to express during the podcast, like, you got to be mature. You can't take it personally. But why can't you take it personally? Like, I just never understand this always, it's business, it's not personal. Like, it's personal, you're questioning my value. You're not paying me my worth. It's personal. And so I don't have a problem with him sort of reacting in this way, but it just seems unfortunate because it feels like the players' hands are tied and there's just nothing they can do.
Yeah, I think when they say you can't take it personal, what they're really saying is that you can't let emotion impact business decisions. And so you don't want to do anything that's going to hurt your standing or your ability to get where you want to get in that sense. So for Saquon and Josh, absolutely it should be personal because, again, they are the heart and soul of their respective offenses. They did put up incredible numbers last year. They do deserve to be paid better than they are being paid under the franchise tag. But again, the system is what it is, and unless they're willing to fight that, I see them playing under the franchise tag this year.
Yeah. And also, on that point, I actually think Saquon will play because these types of things also impact who you are off the field. And we know Saquon to be kind of like a marketing darling, right? He's got deals with Dunkin', Nike, Pepsi. I mean, the list goes on. And if you're sitting out a year, that does impact your value and how those brands see you. Even though, yes, it could probably make up that $10 million that he won't get, it still will impact the ability for those extensions of those partnerships to extend. So I definitely see him playing as well, just to not impact how he's seen off the field as well.
Yeah, if I could say this, the one thing that truly bothers me in this entire situation is the way the NFL is set up, and that players are paid based on the position that they play. In no other sport is your salary tied to the position that you play. In basketball, if you are the most impactful player and you play center or you play guard or you play forward, you get paid the most money. Theoretically, that's how it works. No one says, well, you can only make this much because you're a guard or a center or a forward. Same thing in baseball. But in football, a guy like Saquon and a guy like Josh Jacobs can be the most impactful player on their team. And yet, I think Josh Jacobs, in terms of salary cap allocation, is going to rank 6th or 7th on the Raiders. That's not right. To me, guys should be paid based on their impact and contributions to their team, but that's not the system set up in the NFL, and that's really unfortunate.
Yeah, that's actually an excellent point. I would say in the NBA that is true theoretically, though. You don't get paid as much for your defense as offense. And like those defensive players who can be very impactful on your team, they will just never you know, we're going to get to this team later that we all know and love, the Warriors, but like some would argue that Draymond Green was always a more impactful player than Klay Thompson, but he would never get the salaries Klay Thompson got because it was his defense and not offense. So, but I agree with you that the salary should be based on your impact. And we have lots of measures now to determine impact and what's, you know, affecting winning. And I think we got to sort of move away from these ideas like, oh, you're a running back, or, you know, this role just doesn't get paid as high because it's not, you know, like look at the team and what's your value to the team. And if your value is tremendous, then you should get paid for that. So always great talking with you, Jim Trotter, but there's other news in the NFL. There's other news in the NFL. So let's move to Washington, D.C., our nation's capital, because the fans are happy. They're happy. The fans are happy because
and they should be.
They should be. They should be.
He's out.
They should be.
Yeah.
They should be. I mean, you know, as I wrote, he's going to go down as the most despicable owner and despised owner in franchise history, which is saying a lot. Consider one of the patriarchs of that franchise was George Preston Marshall, who was so racist he wouldn't integrate the team until the federal government said, we won't let you play in our stadium unless you integrate the team. So it's a good thing that he's gone. Here's the thing that doesn't sit well with me about this whole situation is that the women who are most responsible for Dan Snyder being out have never gotten the closure that they want in this situation in terms of the first investigation that was done by Beth Wilkinson. That report, Roger Goodell decided or when it entered into an agreement with the Commanders and with Snyder that report would not be released publicly unless Snyder agreed to it. And we know he was never going to agree to that. So for these women who laid it all on the line, who risk, you know, public scrutiny, who risk financial loss, all of these different things, all they want is for that report to be public. And that has not happened. And so therefore, they cannot celebrate this moment to the same level that fans are and other followers of the franchise.
Yeah.
What's sad is I remember working when Beth Wilkinson's reports went out. I remember working for the Miami Dolphins, and I was a coordinator. So all I was doing was appearances with the dance team. And I remember this being a conversation point amongst the dance team, talking about those trips with the sponsors and the partners and how the women at the then Redskins were being treated. And then going now, having coworkers from the Miami Dolphins who have now gone on to work for the Commanders and worked throughout the NFL, and them talking about what the front office experience has been like. They do have a very long way to go. Whether this report gets out or not, whether those things are released or not, the problem is the action that is taken afterwards, right? And that is what Josh Harris is going to now have to clean up, is even if the day comes that they can get that report out, what are they going to do to clean up the mess and the culture that has been left as a permeating stain on the Commanders? And the fact of the matter is, there's no amount of ticket sales that you can sell to make up for that culture within the front office, both on the football side and the HQ side or the business side. So that, I think, is a really big question I have as to how Josh Harris is going to come and clean it up. I know Magic Johnson had some comments around it this morning, or I think it was yesterday morning, around they're going to do everything they can to make it a great place to work. That's a PR question or PR answer if you needed one. But what are you actually going to do to help those women, help the people in the front office who are absolutely tired and burdened by this entire saga?
Yeah, my guess is probably not much, but we'll see. And I hope they do. And I mean, one of the ways that we'll know that is by hirings and terminations and who they bring in and what we see comes next, because the biggest way, like, to change culture, you have to also change like the people in leadership, right? And I mean that happens on some level anyway when ownership changes, but in general, a culture change is not something easy to do. It's something that takes time, and so we'll see by the actions if they're really about it, you know, what they're saying.
Well,
so
I'll say this real quick. I think that the culture change started somewhat the last few years when Jason Wright came in as team president. and then Ron Rivera as head coach. I think they have made some moves to try and change that culture. And now it will be incumbent on Josh Harris and that group to further those actions and create an environment that is conducive to respect for employees, respect for women, all those sorts of things. So I think that I think they are going to make that culture change. And you're right, it does take time. But Dan Snyder, I know that to some extent, NFL owners are acting as if they are the noble ones here in terms of forcing him out. But let's not forget, they had an opportunity to vote him out earlier, and they chose not to vote him out. Instead, they pressured him to sell this team. So I'm not about to give them a pat on the back for this, especially when they're lining their pockets with a record franchise fee for North America. That's not okay to me. To me, I think these women who initially brought forth these claims are the real heroes here. And they deserve a lot of credit, and they deserve to be recognized for what they did in terms of changing the culture in Washington, getting Dan Snyder out of there, and standing up for what was right. Some of these women, at least one that I know of, turned down a major settlement agreement to stand on principle and to speak her truth to Beth Wilkinson. And that's why, in my opinion, I think these women have every right to say, we want this report to be public.
Wow. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Matt.
No, I was going to say, well, I mean, this is why we have Jim Trotter, right? This is why we have you to add to these conversations. I mean, I think one of the things, and it's probably like a low-key thing, but I know, Zena, you're always kind of interested in things like branding and marketing and things like that. But one of the things that they're saying is that like they're going to probably change the name again. And I actually think that's probably like an underrated but really important change that's going to happen to sort of like disconnect themselves from the previous era. So I was just curious your thoughts on that, Zena.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be an overhaul, but you're right. There's a connection to the Commanders, even though it's a new name that was supposed to be a shift from the old name or a quick one, right? Like how quickly did the Commanders of the name that come up? How were fans really involved with that? Were people excited about that? Right now, the Washington Commanders looks like a Band-Aid on the Redskins, right? And so I think changing the name, all of that, it's going to be an overhaul. Partners are going to have to get used to it. Fans are going to have to get used to it, all the above. But it will be a breath of fresh air, I think, for the DC community, all the Washington fans. I'm going to be very interested in how they go about this process this time. But the good news is that Josh Harris is a pro. This is going to be a mess for him to clean up, but he is a pro. Harris Blitzer, what they've done with the 76ers, I mean, this is a man that is known for carrying teams to glory in terms of turning them around. So I'm really excited for him. His hands are going to be busy. I hope the Magic Johnson, congratulations to Magic Johnson, by the way, becoming an owner. He has 4% of the team, not huge, but significant. I hope that dynamic doesn't become a distraction in all of this. But I really think that the name change, the culture change, all of these things are going to set them off on a better path.
Okay, I'm not even going to weigh in on this because I'm going to just let Jim close us out on this. But is that 4%? Because, I mean, Magic is here talking about, if we could get up his next tweet, he's talking about this is like he didn't say momentous. Let me not rephrase the man's word. But he just said like this is a big thing for the Black community.
Historic?
Yeah, historic. And I was like, is it historic for the Black community? It's historic, I guess, in terms of him being another Black owner in the NFL, and it's historic probably for Magic Johnson. But I didn't agree with that sentiment. But Jim, what do you think of Magic's 4% ownership?
Not a lot to be frank with you. Look, if you want to get me excited about Black ownership, then be the controlling owner, be the person who has the power to make decisions. Magic doesn't have that. This is no different for me than when Jay-Z was a part owner of the New Jersey Nets. Or I can look at Larry Fitzgerald being a part owner of the Phoenix Suns or whatever. It's great that there's limited partners who are minorities, but I want to see people who actually run franchises, who make the decisions, And off the top of my head, I can only think of 2 Blacks who have ever owned a major professional sports franchise. And they were both in the NBA, and that was both in Charlotte with Bob Johnson, followed by Michael Jordan there. So kudos to Magic, and he should be excited. But I believe he said some of the same things after he was a limited partner with the Los Angeles Dodgers. Let's get to a point where we have Black ownership in the league who are in a controlling position, in a decision-making position. And again, if we're going to talk historic, I can think of some Black women who are part of the Denver Broncos group in terms of ownership. And to me, that was more significant than Magic being part of the Washington Commanders. Just being honest here.
Yeah.
Wow. Look, shout out to anyone who's a Black owner. I don't want to minimize it, but I think Jim's point is important, that we need to be in positions to make have decision
of authority.
Authority, and actually be able to make decisions, I think. So, Jim,
we shouldn't just be figureheads, right? We just don't want to be figureheads and talking heads. Exactly. Yeah.
I'm over symbolism.
But that's what they do. They trot us out. Yeah, they trot us out and put us out front like we've really made progress, when in fact we haven't made any progress. Exactly.
Yeah, I'm over the symbolism and the performative stuff. Jim, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Jim.
Appreciate you. We need you back on again more. We miss you.
You always bring the fire. Always bring some interesting knowledge.
My number hasn't changed.
You've been busy, man. You've been
my
busy.
Number has
you in
not
Jamaica.
Changed,
you got a new job. You got a lot going on, but football is too close. So
I always have time for you ladies.
Awesome.
Thank you, Jim.
We'll be inviting you back soon. Bye.
I felt like I was struggling with Kuminga a bit. Like, what am I doing wrong? Not necessarily what he's doing wrong. And AV, who has a great relationship with him, told me, he said, do you know him?
That's a deep question.
And I start thinking about what it means to know someone. I don't know him, yet I'm trying to lead him. And that's something that Coach Izzo taught me as a freshman. Draymond, how can you lead somebody if you don't know them? You don't spend any time with them.
That's a deep question, Dina. I just like that. That's a deep question.
You messy. You messy. You are messy.
No, but listen, I don't really want to talk about Draymond that much, but we know we talked about him on Wednesday, and just he had all these, his whole back and forth with Jordan Poole's father, and then Jordan Poole's friend, and Jordan Poole chimed in. It was all this stuff over social because Draymond reignited the resurfaced everything that happened with the punch by suggesting, he doesn't just punch people. So clearly sort of indicating that Poole may have said something, right? we're not gonna go back there and have that whole discussion again. But just, he does that. He also was on Pat Beverly's podcast talking about his relationship with Chris Paul, right, as well. And basically saying, I'm not going to front because he's on record. It's noted that he said he doesn't like Chris Paul. So he's like, but we're going to talk, and it's going to be good to talk to adults again in the room. And I'm like, well, first of all, how are you throwing shade at people being adults? But it was just also, it was just sort of the way he reacted and talked about it. It's just do you have to be emphasizing the fact that you didn't like Chris Paul and you're not going to front about it? And then, now reports come out about his relationship with Jonathan Kuminga, which he spoke about on this podcast with Paul George. And he doesn't say that there is a beef, but he says that they don't really have a close relationship, right? And Monty Poole says, it is a problem and it can only be fixed by Draymond, right? The fact that they have a non-relationship. And so I'm just sort of wondering, Zena, he's doing all this talking, and we know that Jonathan Kuminga has a relationship with Jordan Poole, right? Because he tweeted, or he threaded, is that the new term? He threaded a message to him, right? So he did that. We know Wiggins has a relationship with Poole. We know Loon has a relationship with Poole, and I'm sure others do. I just feel like Draymond is disrupting. He's starting off the season again And again, the season hasn't started, but he's just creating unnecessary drama already right now that's not needed.
Sure. Yeah. In my attempt to empathize and try to understand why there is so much attention right now around Draymond that he is cultivating himself, my thought in my empathy mind is thinking that he is trying to ensure that people don't think he is, and for lack of a better word, an a-hole, right? A terrible person, a person that hits young players that had relationships with him. We saw the comment from Jordan Poole's best friend saying that they were cool and they had looked up to him and they spent time with him. And I'm sure that Draymond doesn't want to seem like he's this awful, mean, unhinged human that just came out of nowhere and punched Jordan. Now, what the problem with all of this is, the more he continues to talk about it, and the less it is an actual accountability statement of, I messed up, I made a mistake, I made a decision that isn't like me, I shouldn't have done it, and I apologize, that is it. And rather redirects it to, well, that's not who I am. So you know that if I'm not like that, then that means it's actually more indicative of the other person's behavior. That is the distraction that you're talking about, right? The more and more that this continues to drag out, rather than just being accountable, whether it's about Jordan Poole, whether it's about, the fact that he has said what he has said about Chris Paul in the past, and instead just focuses on, yeah, I've said these things, I've done these things, I'm human, I'm not perfect, but I also know that I'm a good leader and I'm going to be better and I'm going to do better. Rather than that being the conversation, it will be a distraction. It will continue to be a distraction. And where I'm curious, and I know this is something that you've talked about on your Twitter, and I know many people are talking about this, is where are the accountability brothers, right? Where are the people on his team within the org that are coming to him and saying, bro, you ain't got to do this. Right? We know you're a good dude, and that is not going to be the defining moment of your career. You don't have to go and have yourself, other people, media members go and do this PR tour for you around the Jordan Poole situation. And now it's expanding into this Jonathan Kuminga situation. I really just wish that there would be a foot in the ground, the line drawn in the sand of kill all this noise. We are the Warriors. We have a good culture. We are leaders. We respect young players, older players, new players that are joining our ecosystem. And that's it, right? Let's focus on the good things that are going on in our team. So I really wish that would happen. I hope that can happen. I'm not in Draymond's head, so I don't really know why he's saying all of this and being the distraction that he ultimately is being. But that's where my mind goes when I try to empathize with the situation, understand what's going on.
Yeah, can we go back to that Monty Poole tweet that was just up? Because I was making a lot of faces when you were speaking, Zena, and it's not because you aren't eloquent, because you are, but it is because, I just feel like it won't be the defining moment for Draymond's career, but it is a stain on not only his career, but on the legacy of the Warriors and what we perceive their culture to be. And so, Monty Poole, someone we both know, it's no surprise that the younger dudes on the Warriors roster were shook when Dre hit Jordan. Wasn't the leadership they'd heard about, punctured the culture, rough intro to the league, 3 of them since traded. They are probably looking at the Warriors organization sideways. And I feel it's a little misguided for people to believe okay, Jordan's been traded and now we just go back to normal. I think there's still healing and relationship.
For sure.
And things that have to happen. And I don't think there's any more come on, Dre, you shouldn't be there was a time, notice after this all happened, we didn't see Draymond potting. I don't think that was he just made that choice. It's enough of let's work with Draymond. And it's more about okay, a directive to Draymond.
Yeah, right.
You cannot talk about Jordan Poole anymore. You guys come up with some language you want him to use, and that's the answer going forward. Continuing this discussion, because it's a distraction and it's an annoyance. And at whatever point Steve Kerr meets with the media again, or Stephen Curry does, they're going to now have to answer about this situation. And I'm sure, and Mike Dunleavy, and I'm sure that they did not want to have to deal with that, right? What they want to be talking about is what's to come for the future. What Warriors fans want to be talking about is Steph Curry's underrated film, which documentary, which debuted today. So, I mean, do you have anything more on that? Because we should, on this Draymond subject. If not, we can move on, because that's what we should be talking about.
I'll follow up to your point. I agree with you 1000%. And when I say the accountability police to kill the noise, I don't mean that this is just going to go back to normal for them. It needs to not be a thing for us, AKA people who are not in the situation, people who are not in that locker room and not on that team. We don't need to be figuring out parts and bits and pieces of how all of this is playing out from one perspective. Right. And that's what I mean by the accountability police needs to kill this noise that's leaking out of the gym and out of the Warriors culture and their world from one voice. And there's no balance in that. So I agree with you. There's definitely healing that needs to be done, but we shouldn't be a part of it. Right. It should be this team that is healing. And then we are now seeing the results of that. And yes, this documentary shows you just a little bit of why we care so much about that Warriors culture, right? Anyone that saw that clip or the clips so far of Underrated are like, you are mesmerized at what this team was able to do, specifically Steph Curry. It just makes you remember, wow, this is the most underdog story we've seen in decades, right? And this team, how many people counted them out? How many people said the dynasty ends? How many people said there'd be no way that they could come back and get another ring, and they did it? That's what we should be talking about. So I 1000% agree with you on that.
Yeah, and Warriors fans were buzzing, going crazy.
Yes.
Excited. I haven't watched it yet. Have you watched it yet?
I have not seen it just yet, but I do plan on seeing it this weekend. I just know it's going to be unreal.
I feel like I'm going to know everything about it before I actually watch, because so many clips have already released. But, it was sort of feeling like a happy time for the Warriors. And a lot of it was about Steph. But, he had the ACC. He's doing the Underrated tour. He has the documentary coming out, and it was sort of like, okay, good vibes. And we're getting back to good vibes. And they need to do some team building. We need to get back to that. But,
Yes.
like when Monty even tweeted last night, Warriors fans were like, enough, like just tweet about Steph and Underrated film. It's just like,
everybody's tired. They're tired.
Yes,
they don't want to hear about this anymore.
Absolutely. So I am looking forward to watching this. There was a debate that sort of started around this film, and I think it's a very odd thing. Like, people are like, there's this contingent of people who are offended by the notion that Steph Curry's being considered underrated. And I was like, well, for one, we're not talking about him right now in his career, though I would say he's probably still a little underrated. But we're talking about what he was going into college, and college coming into the NBA, and what people thought of him. And I don't even understand how this is in question. Like, why are we pretending? His dad's alma mater was like, yeah, you can like try out for the team, but they weren't willing to give him a scholarship. And he went to Davidson. I mean, it's not really known as like a big time school. Like, you know what I mean? It's just like, why are we pretending? And he's the reason why a lot of us know Davidson and gave it notoriety. So he was
Let's
doubted.
just say, he's like the only reason we know Davidson. And I'm a person from North Carolina, did not know Davidson before Steph Curry. So let's not even discount that. I'll tell you what, Twitter always shows me that recency bias is a thing. People will only remember, oh, this man's getting paid $400 million a year. He's got these contracts. He's got this money. He's got Aisha. He's got his family. He's winning championships. They completely forget the Cinderella story that was Davidson, number 10 seeded, coming into that NCAA tournament, and the upending that they did, going and getting kicked out at the Elite Eight. There was who is this skinny kid out of North Carolina? There was this concept of he's too small. There's this concept of what position does he play? Is he going to be good enough? Oh, he only shoots the three. He's not that good going into the paint. I mean, there was all of these narratives of just how not good he was, or not good enough. So yeah, we're sending this out right now while he's 4 rings down and he's got these contracts and all the above. But people, let's not forget the stories. Let's not forget the narrative. No.
Right. You could
Come
even argue that this documentary is premature because I expect him to add more to his resume. You know who
That's
is
a really
not,
good point. That's a really good point. Yeah.
You know who is not underrating Stephen Curry? Usain Bolt, another GOAT.
Yes, I love that. He
tweeted out a picture of himself today in Stephen Curry's jersey. And we just have to give a shout out to, you know, my brethren, my Bretta. That's, you know,
he knows what's up.
We have to give a shout out to Usain Bolt. I mean, he is a Warriors fan. We've seen he's put up in stories before with him cheering for the Dubs. I don't think it's a coincidence that he put this picture out today, Zena, or maybe I'm just wishful thinking, but on the day, underrated drops.
It's probably, I mean, let's just be real. Usain Bolt also is not he's not an Under Armour athlete. Like, he's not doing this to support, like, you know, someone within this world. No, he dropped this on purpose. Now, this jersey might be in his rotation, right? It might be his weekly outfit, right, on Fridays, whatever it is. But yes, him dropping this photo with his Mercedes-Benz looking good. This is so Jamaican. I love it. But like, he of course put this out. I think, yes, he wanted to show some love to his brother, make sure that was the focus. And, you know, Usain's actually, he's good for this. He's good for supporting other athletes and good for supporting the Warriors in particular and making sure they get their love. So shout out to Usain. Appreciate you knowing what's up and knowing what matters.
Yeah, of course. And I would be remiss because there's some other NBA news. And we talked earlier in the show. We talked earlier in the show about the fact that, like, players keep removing things from their bios. But one in the NBA did that recently. And that is James Harden. This saga with the Philadelphia Sixers, it continues, Zena. And you know, I don't know what to make of it because the reports are that he is still set on going to the Clippers. He's still set on going to the Clippers. You know, ultimately, I think that deal eventually happens. But James Harden is not happy. And like, this is not like official, but there's just been some rumors sort of circulating that part of this is about the fact that, like, you know, he opted out of his deal. He left some money on the table last year so they would be able to pay other players. And then, so he was expecting the max, the full max, 200 mil. And like that there was a wink deal, and you're not supposed to have wink deals, but this is why, because people never expected this relationship between, you know, Harden and Daryl Morey to be strained because they always had like a great relationship. So he's removed the Sixers. He has removed the Philadelphia Sixers from his bio. And also, like, he's set on going to the Clippers. So how do you see this playing out, Zena?
What's so interesting is that I don't know. And the thing is, we're not going to know anytime soon. Like, there's nothing that is pressuring the Sixers to do anything right now. Season hasn't started yet. There aren't games happening yet. But it's interesting. We were just talking about distractions. That is the only leverage that James Harden has right now, is essentially promising, in not so many words, to be a distraction and to be an annoyance and to be a hindrance to the production of this team if he joins training camp October 2nd. And everyone knows Sixers ain't got time for that, right? These are the Sixers that are still trying to battle for a championship. They don't need any distractions going into a training camp, especially in this new year. So that's the only leverage he really has. But right now, Daryl Morey doesn't feel like moving. And I think this whole situation reflects that wink, none of that matters. It's business. Daryl Morey has made it very clear.
We saw what he did with the Houston Rockets. We saw what Harden did with the Rockets, and we also saw what Daryl Morey did before with Ben Simmons. But I don't think he has that leeway in the organization anymore. I don't think he can hold out that long. So he's gonna have to make something happen. Will it be James Harden to the Clippers? If it does, then we can talk about later what that will mean for the Clips. But it's messy. It's messy.
It is messy.
It is Ladies First Fridays, and I want to talk about the women. So let's take a break and get right back so we can talk about the women. Women in sports, baby.
Always.
Well, it is post All-Star, but while some teams are struggling, the Aces beat the Storm to improve to 20-2, matching the WNBA's record for the best start to a season.
And they're just gonna keep getting better. I mean, they're literally on their way to making the 29-game win in a regular season, which is the record held by the Phoenix Mercury. And they're just chilling. They're having a great time. Now, don't get me wrong. Yes.
Do we think they're going to surpass that, the 29 wins?
Yeah. 1,000%. And I
wonder how
many
wins
like
they're going to get. I'm not going to make you guess right now, but we do think
I won't guess now, because the thing about it is that they still have to see the wings again. They have to see some teams again that have been able to upend some really great teams. What I'm very curious about is any night, though, could be any other W team's night, right? Outside of the Aces, the rest of the league is just kind of like any night a team can come in and get a win, or stumble and fall and let a lesser team beat them. So I'm very curious if there's any teams that kind of have targets on the Aces back to be that team that can get them to stumble and fall. But knowing that Candace Parker was just listed as out, I don't think that makes a big impact on what the Aces can do. They're so stacked and so versatile in the way that they can perform. It's not really going to make an impact. They're really killing it right now. I do wish
and that's
Candace
so
Parker
crazy.
gets better soon.
Yeah, definitely hoping for Candace to be better, but it's a testament to how great they are. One night they didn't have Kelsey Plum, didn't make a difference. They didn't have Candace Parker, didn't make a difference, and they're blowing teams out. So it's like, if they were, and we want everyone healthy for the postseason, but if they were to even lose one of these players, they can likely still win it all. That's the thing. Yeah. I mean, I really do. I feel like it's the Aces. And like I said, it's the Aces world and we're just living in it. I just think it's them and everyone else. And I think the only team that has the potential ceiling is the Liberty, but I just don't know if they're going to be able to hit their ceiling this season, you know, and they are one of those teams. They just had like a really bad loss the other night. So I don't, you know, we will see, but you know, something I just, you know, there was a dust up last night in the Sky Mercury and it involved two players who are like featured in an iconic picture, and that is Kahleah and Sophie Cunningham. And it, you know, it got a little, this is from, you know, the finals a couple of years ago when they played, but you know, last night they were playing and, you know, it was a debate whether, you know, Sophie was going for the ball, but it looked like she grabbed at, you know, Kahleah Copper's legs. And, you know, it just, these two and they're back and forth, you know, it's just, it's a fun thing. So I'm like, I'm here for it. I'm not here. Right. I'm not here for players to get hurt or get injured, but I like this fierce competition in sports. I like it. And I feel like it's like women shouldn't act like that, or we shouldn't talk about it, or we shouldn't amp it up, you know, because there's some people who are saying, you know, that she's dirty. And I'm actually not even levying those terms, but I'm just saying, like, allow us to fan out and talk about women's sports. Say we talk about men's sports too.
That's right. Women's sports needs that freedom to have villains, to have dirty players, to have dirty plays that you can call out. If you can do that in the NFL and call out a dirty play and still buy that player's jersey, let us do that in the women's game too. It doesn't need to be a tea party. It doesn't need to be kumbaya, everyone holding hands, everyone's so sweet. Oh, good play, good job. I know you're my competition, but good job, I'm so proud of you. No. If someone's dirty, let them be dirty. If someone wants to say something about, hey, I'm better than you, or, oh, I'm going to get you next time I come back to your city, let them say it and let us as fans.
Dirty without injuring anyone, right?
And I mean, yes, yeah, sure,
we have these conversations all the time about players like Marcus Smart, Draymond Green, and in the NBA. So, but it's just like, we also say those players are passionate and they are, you know, rugged, and there's other descriptors we use for them.
They need the women's game deserves the same versatility and freedom to be competitive and to be exciting, the same way that the men's game does too. We keep talking about growing the game, expansion of teams, expansion of rosters, expansion. No, it's just expansion of how we discuss the game. allow fans and us, the media, to be able to say, hey, that was a dirty play. And that doesn't necessarily define that player, but we can call it out as what it is. Or being able to say, like, oh, this person's better than this person. And it's a competition. That's all it needs to be. It doesn't need to be this whole, oh, wow, everyone needs to be playing nice. Like, why are people being mean? Mean? Yeah. It's sports. This is sports. Like, what are we talking about right now? And it's pro sports. This isn't your fourth grade like league. This is pro sports, people. Come on.
Like you said, it isn't a tea party. And you know where it won't be a tea party? In the World Cup, because we know that those women like to show passion, right? So
I love it. I love it. I'm so excited about World Cup. I don't know if you guys were catching the game last night, but World Cup's going on right now in Australia and New Zealand. This right now has the most attention on it. They have sold 1 million tickets in the Australia venue. I mean, they're thinking that they're going to break even. That's huge. Even though breaking even sounds like, hey, they're not making any money, that's huge for a tournament like this to not be operating at a loss. For them to have prize money, they've gone up 3x in the prize money for the women. They're still working to get to the level of the men, and their goal is to get there by 2026, according to FIBA. But they're extending the game and they're expanding the game. And I'm really, really excited for this year's tournament because brands like Nike, all these huge brands are getting behind it. And that is the support that the women's game needs to get the visibility and the support from the fans and get everyone excited. So tune in. Women's team for the U.S. are playing tomorrow against Vietnam. That story alone, that Vietnam made it, is huge. So very excited for that game, 6 p.m. Eastern.
And we do know that some of the players on the U.S. team will be playing in tribute in the honor of Katie Meyer. From Stanford, who died by suicide. So Naomi, Girma wrote an amazing tribute to her, and they will be honoring her as they play and try to get another win for the U.S. in the World Cup.
Oh, yes, the game is...
Yeah, that was a dream.
The game is tomorrow, but the game is tonight. Yes.
Tonight, but it's, in the U.S.
Tomorrow for that. Yes, exactly. And Naomi Girma, Katie Meyer told her she would be on this team. She made the national team. She will be on the roster tonight. They're working around mental health and wanting to support that initiative. So playing for the world, playing for the U.S., and playing for their friend, it's all beautiful. I'm so excited for the World Cup.
Thanks for joining us, y'all. Have a great weekend.
Ladies First Friday. Thank you. Bye, guys.
Hey, thank you for watching Brother from Another. If you haven't hit that subscribe button, go ahead and do that now. Don't forget, you can catch us 3 to 4 weekdays on PeacockTV.com and on Sirius XM Channel 85.